Hello, class, and welcome to Chapter 1. Today we're going to talk about just what anthropology is so that you get kind of a basis to go on the rest of the class. So, anthropology asks questions about humanity. Anthro, human, pology, the study of. What we're doing is we're studying humans and their various capacities. So that's why there's a four-field approach. So they shared basic biology and behavioral characteristics. They also exhibit tremendous variation around the globe. So this is saying that we are very similar, but we express ourselves differently. And that's why we study humanity. So what is anthropology and why is it relative to today's world? Well, we will definitely see, and hopefully by the end of the semester, you will have an answer that you can put to that as well. So, how did anthropology begin? It really started in the 16th to 17th century and is building on the natural sciences. That's when we started to look at the difference between the different phenotypes or physical characteristics that show up around the globe. And that's what they are. They're just phenotypes. It's nothing else. So during the 1800s, the academic discipline devoted to the observation and analysis of human variations began. And this was done by Sir E.B. Tylor. He's considered the founder and father of anthropology. Three key concepts that shaped the foundations of professional anthropology in the 1850s. We will look at each of these three concepts in a little bit more depth. So, industrialization. The end of feudalism brought in industrialization. And that was a huge switch from people being widespread to bringing them into large numbers into towns and cities. And people working in factories instead of on farms. It's just a lot of differences happened when industrialization came about, including the change to capitalism in most of the industrialized nations. So, studying how European villages and cities were structured and how they perpetrated their cultures led to questions about non-Western societies and how they worked as well. So, this was people would go out, the very well educated people would go out to these non-industrialized nations and see the similarities and differences in how they worked. So evolution was a very big part of the beginning of anthropology. You see it very much in our beginning theories. There are a lot of the evolution of religion and the evolution of human societies. And they were all based on Darwinism. This was about the time that Darwinism exploded on the scenes. And so we see this intertwined in the early theories of anthropology. We've come a long way. So you will hear a lot about some of the earlier theories of anthropology. Please realize that they're no longer being used in a lot of ways. So A unilineal, that means one line of cultural evolution, the idea that human societies could be ranked along a single ladder of progress. That's what I was just saying about the evolution and Darwinism being put onto societies. So you have savages and then chiefdoms and you go on from there. We'll most likely end up talking about that a little bit at least, if not in greater depth later in the semester. So, colonialism. This also played a really big part in the creation of anthropology. This is partly because um, anthropologists were from the colonial powers, and as they were being shipped off to different locations, what they were trying to do is create a reason that these people could be enslaved and their lands could be taken from them. So anthropology really does have a dark history. Not doing the same thing now, but anyway. So they say that it was to better understand the indigenous people of their colonies, but how they were doing it isn't really what was a good idea. They would measure the heads of people to tell the intelligence level and look at the cranial capacity and compare them to the white man. And it just, yeah, not a good thing. So the savage paradigm is to observe indigenous ways of life before traditional languages and customs disappeared. And that is something that we're still doing to some degree now, because a lot of these indigenous ways of lives are being lost as the world becomes more industrial and these ways of lives are no longer needed. So, what are the four subfields of anthropology and what do they share in common? We have cultural anthropology, archaeology, linguistic anthropology, and biological anthropology. The four fields. Kind of an important thing to know what those four fields are. Hint, hint, you might see it on a test. You'll definitely see it on at least a quiz. And so they are all studying different ways of human interaction, but all focused on humanity. How people act more or less today. Archaeology is our past. Linguistic, how we speak about things, which you will find linguistic anthropology is kind of interesting. Never thought I'd hear myself say that. But it's both how we see and how we perceive the world is based a lot on our linguistics. Biological anthropology, while this doesn't just study humans, but hominids in general, we see that apes, monkeys, looking at them and our earlier evolutionary selves, we can find out a lot about humanity. Or disease, biological anthropology is good for that. You have forensic, all sorts of things under biological anthropology. So, cultural anthropology. This definitely focuses on social lives of living communities. Before the 1970s, most of the field work was in non-Western or non-industrialized communities. Today, there is a study of just about anything. However, I will most definitely say that it is still a struggle for those of us in digital anthropology to be taken as anthropologists and not sociologists, because sociologists have always been studying the here and now, but it is what it is. So, archaeology studies past cultures by excavating. Um, It is broken into two separate parts. We have the prehistoric, before the written records, and historic archaeology, which is the present or historical times. But there's also stuff like the excavation of the trash dumps, which is something that's kind of interesting. Might talk about that a little bit more later. If you're interested, let me know, and I'll definitely get you some information on it. We have biological, so human evolution, health and diseases, genetics, diet and nutrition, the non-human primates, and impact of social stresses on the body, because we know that those do make a huge impact on humans. Linguistics is how people communicate through language. Language shapes group membership and identity. It also shapes the way that you see things. Because if you don't have the word for green, how are you going to describe something that's green? Green is typically not one of the words that's absent from any of the different societies, just because you need green for plants. But just think about that. How would you be able to describe something if you didn't have the color, the name for the color orange? How would you describe an orange? So, anthropology is definitely an interdisciplinary field. We unite the four fields through the key concepts of culture, cultural relativism, diversity, change, and holism. And we do use a lot of sociology, psychology, and history, as well as the hard sciences. So we tend to put them all together. Culture, taken for granted notions, roles, morals, and behaviors within a society that group feels are natural. This is called norms or normativity. And this is Sir E.B. Tyler. So the idea of culture as an integral part of anthropology first came around in the 1970s by the father of anthropology, Edward Burton Tyler, or Sir E.B. Tyler. He was knighted the last 4 years of his life. So it should always say Sir. Ethnocentrism. This is the assumption that one's way of doing things is correct, and it dismisses other people's practices or views as wrong or ignorant. So this can provoke intolerance and make cross-cultural understanding impossible. You see this a lot with different religions fighting amongst each other, as well as different cultural norms. So cultural relativism. In an attempt to avoid ethnocentrism, anthropologists emphasize cultural relativism. What this means is that the moral and intellectual principles that one should withhold judgment about seemingly strange or exotic beliefs and practices. So just because something seems strange, odd, or unusual doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Even if it completely conflicts with what it is you believe, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So, diversity. Another of anthropology's major contributions to knowledge has been to describe and explain human diversity, the sheer variety of ways human beings around the world are. So, diversity refers to the multiplicity and variety, which is not the same as differences. Within multiplicity and variety, there is both a difference and similarities. And so you will notice that one at the banner is Margaret Mead, and she is saying that anthropology is trying to make the world a better place for people to be different and it be okay. So, change. As new topics, issues, and problems emerge, anthropologists shift towards studying these new concerns. Anthropology is increasingly practiced by everyone, including the members of many minority groups and women. Now, we do see a huge influx of women in the discipline, and that is amazing. And while we do tend to study new concepts, anthropology, I will definitely say, is at least a decade behind typically. So, yeah. Holism. Anthropology combines the study of human prehistory, social life, language, and biology. Provides a powerful tool to understanding the whole human experience in context. So we try to take every part of a person's life, not just their religion or language or a cultural normative experience, but how they interact with the world around them in all of its aspects, the food that they eat, their beliefs, what they live in, how they live, how they interact with other cultures. Everything has to go together. It's the effort to synthesize these approaches into a single comprehensive explanation. How do anthropologists know what they know? The scientific method. We definitely use it, so we develop, test, and disprove hypotheses. In science, theories are tested and repeatedly support hypotheses, not guesses. There is no such thing really as truth with a capital T anymore. Some anthropologists use quantitative. Quantitative is like measuring and counting. It's more mathematical and statistical. You see this a lot of the times with the surveys that cultural anthropologists will use, but more in the biological anthropology as well as archaeology. Qualitative is non-calculable. And so that's participant observation. Qualitative to aim to produce in-depth and detailed descriptions of social behaviors and beliefs. Ethnographic method, this is prolonged and intense observation of and participation in the life of a community. And it's most definitely a hallmark of cultural anthropology. Comparative method allows for anthropologists to derive insight from carefully comparisons of cultures or societies, and this is done through participant observation. How's anthropology put to work in the world? It's done through applied anthropology. This is the anthropological research commissioned to serve an organization's needs. We see this throughout history of anthropology that different organizations will bring in anthropologists to try to understand certain norms within a region before colonial influences come in. So they say it's anthropology's fifth subfield, but eh. So what is ethical issues do anthropology raise? Ethics and anthropology organically connected to being a good anthropologist. Many modern anthropologists assert that they are obligated to go beyond do no harm and actually do good. And this is something that is contested very heavily because we really do strive, according to the American Anthropological Association, to try to do no harm. So ethically speaking, going in and observing and participating does not mean making changes, but it's a really fine line, in all honesty, because this person right here, this is most likely the Tuskegee scandal. The Tuskegee scandal was really horrible, and they did not tell these people, the African American community in Tuskegee, Alabama, that they were giving them syphilis, nor did they tell them that they were just giving them nothing. So they watched to see how a syphilis affected the body. They used them as guinea pigs. It was absolutely horrific. And because of this, we now have to go through an IRB, and the Institutional Review Board, in order to do a study. And they are very, very strict on it. So there's doing good, and then there's that good that can change the society, and that's something we definitely do not want to do. Okay, so luckily you guys get the review of the chapter. So I really do like this book so far. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And now that you've done this, go ahead and you can do the quiz or a discussion board. Either way is perfectly fine. And we will go on to chapter 2 and, well, whenever you guys decide to look at it. But that will be the last PowerPoint for this week. It would be chapter 2. Okay, see you later.